Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out on an icy, cold evening. And I'd like to welcome you to the 2020 season announcement party. I am Elizabeth McGuire. I'm the executive director of the Colorado Music Festival and Center for Musical Arts. And I can only say that we are so excited about what's coming in 2020. Very happy to share that with you. I'd like to thank you for coming, again, for braving the weather. But also, if you're in this room, if you've been invited to this event, it means that you're sponsoring concerts, you're supporting us financially, you're coming to the concerts, you're buying multiple tickets, and all of these things help build this amazing organization that we have today. Without all of you, we wouldn't be able to do some of the things that we're going to show you what's coming up soon. So I'd like to say a few words of thanks to a few of you in the room. First of all, we have a few of our friends from Chautauqua here, and I won't make anyone come up front, but hi to Shelley Benford, Executive Director of Chautauqua, Colorado's Chautauqua Association. And Shelley, we really appreciate everything that Chautauqua does for us, your support. We have some Chautauqua box office staff over here as well. Thank you. And I'd like to thank our recent past board president, Stephen Traynor, also in the back of the room. Thank you, Stephen. 2 years of very hard work helping us to get to the point that we are today, that we can announce such amazing things tonight. And last but certainly not least, our newly minted board president, Ann Beer. Hi, Ann. Very quickly about Ann. Ann is an amazing leader in the community, but also a musician. So she's very true to the heart of the festival, and we're so excited to work with her. Ann, thank you for everything.
Very welcome. Thank you. I'm so glad to see so many of you. This is a really exciting event for us. And I'm thrilled and honored to be stepping into this new role. I was part of the orchestra, so this is quite a shift for me. With the music festival at such an exciting time in our history. The 20th season, as you will see, is truly reflective of Peter's vision. As a music director, he has energized us, and his enthusiasm for the festival is incredibly contagious. In particular, I'd like to thank our staff, many of them are here tonight. They work with Peter throughout the year, and it is because of their incredible dedication and professionalism that we can do things like this. So I thank you all. It's not surprising that the board is thrilled to support Peter's new and innovative initiatives. And we, along with our audience, are continually embracing the excellence of our orchestra, as I'm sure all of you have seen through every single concert. So without further ado, I know we want to get to the main event. I am incredibly thrilled to reintroduce to almost all of you, Peter Ungen, and he will share some of those exciting details with you.
Wow, I appear and she immediately starts playing. That's wonderful. How are you? Welcome, everybody. I am so delighted to see you all, and thank you for braving the weather. I know you're used to it, but that's quite a snowfall. We fortunately arrived at noon yesterday, so we've just watched it happen. And of course, Boulder is beautiful at any time of year, but after a 12-inch snowfall, it's unbelievably fantastic. So we're really thrilled to be here. The festival is an inspiration to me, and I think you all kind of know that at this point. I just find the whole atmosphere around it, from a musical, artistic, social, even from a business point of view, working with the people in the management and with the members of the board is truly a delight. And it's been great fun putting together this season, because it's actually the first season that I started putting together when I knew I was actually going to be music director for 5 years. So This is a little bit of a departure in some ways. There are several new things that we're going to be talking about and you're going to be witnessing up here on the screen tonight. Let me start with saying that we're going to be obviously celebrating the 250th anniversary of Beethoven. There's nothing particularly novel about that idea, but it would be completely unacceptable not to note that this is a very significant moment in the history of a composer who, after all, had probably more influence on classical music and the world than any other composer one can name. But we're going to do, I think, a very unusual celebration. And it all starts, in fact, on the first night, and I'll explain that to you later. But there's a kind of a sequence of events through the festival that show our huge respect and love of Beethoven. Another thing that's going to be new is we will have more chamber music concerts than we have had in the past. Altogether 6, in fact. And we have begun what we're calling the Robert Mann Chamber Music Series. Now, Robert Mann was the first violinist of the Juilliard Quartet for 50 years, one of the most influential musicians in the 20th century in America and even into the 21st century. He was also my teacher, but he taught almost everyone. And I asked his son, Nicholas, who's one of my close friends, we actually met playing quartets, studying with his father, and he was pretty tough on Nicky, I can tell you. But I asked him, I said, is there any kind of a series anywhere in the world to celebrate Robert Mann's history as arguably the greatest first violinist in the history of string quartet playing? And he said, no, there's nothing. And I said, I think I'd like to try to change that. And very fortunately, our great friends, the Christophersons, happened to be friends of Robert Mann and Lucy Mann. Lucy is 98, and I just saw her a couple of weeks ago. Robert passed away about 3 years ago. So the Christophersons were just as keen. In fact, I think we sat at lunch and had the idea at the same instant. And so we will have a very exciting series of chamber music concerts, which will also, of course, include our festival players. But the first Robert Mann concert will feature the Juilliard String Quartet. And these concerts will be in Chautauqua. I think it's the most wonderful place to do anything, actually, even speak, which is unusual for a great concert hall. Usually great concert halls are difficult to speak in. But this is, I think, a really exciting development for the festival. We'll have the Juilliard Quartet. We will then have the St. Lawrence String Quartet, who studied with Robert Mann, and that was absolutely one of his very favorite string quartets. We will then have a quartet called Brooklyn Rider. I'll tell you a little bit more about them. And then we will have 2 more concerts with the festival players, beautiful programs. And the 6th concert is something called Kaleidoscope, which I'll explain when we get to it. So that's the new Robert Mann series. There's another quartet that appears during the festival, and you'll find out about that in a moment. So there's that. Then we've decided to start a fellowship program because this is such a great festival, and we have this wonderful school as well affiliated with the festival. And there's never really been such a strong connection, and we've always been trying to think, how can we gain a little bit more of a connection? And this idea came to us all, let's have a fellowship program. So we're inviting 8 young players for the summer, 3 weeks, four at a time, 3 weeks each. And they will take part in some of the orchestral concerts. They will play chamber music. They will be coached by various people who have a chamber music background, which happens to include me, of course. And then they will teach at the school. And they will perform in a couple of concerts prior to festival concerts. And if I get my way, I'm going to have them down on Pearl Street playing because I just feel like we should have classical music down on Pearl Street during the festival, maybe at other times as well, but it would be so, right, a lot of people like that idea, good. So that's an exciting development. We're doing this in conjunction with an organization called Sphinx, which is fantastic, based in Detroit, and they promote young talent, particularly of diverse backgrounds. So there's quite a lot of diversity in the young students, the young fellowship students that will be coming here. In fact, I might as well tell you that the first group are a quartet already, and you may have heard of them, the Ivalas Quartet, who are at CU, and they're in residence studying with the Takash Quartet. So I'm very excited to have them. And then there'll be 4 individuals coming for the last 3 weeks of the festival. So there's a few ideas. Why don't I start now letting you see what's going to be happening? I'm supposed to push one of these buttons. I'm assuming the one to the right goes forwards. Now, the opening concert is very exciting to me. I said that we were going to do a slightly unusual celebration of Beethoven. The very first piece that you're going to hear this summer is by Hannah Lash. Now, if that name is familiar, it's because she won that Click competition and played a harp concerto, I think, or maybe it was another piece of hers. She's a harpist and a wonderful composer, professor at Yale School of Music. And she is writing a piece. In fact, she just emailed me today and said she's finished it, inspired by Beethoven's Second Symphony. So there are 2 movements to this piece of hers. The first one inspired by the first movement, the second one inspired by the second movement. I believe she's going to continue, but we're going to get this premiere to open our festival. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to celebrate Beethoven. I also think that for us to listen to music that we don't know, when so often we'll start with something like Beethoven Egmont, is really kind of fascinating for all of us. The second piece in the festival, on that opening night, features a piece by John Adams called Absolute Jest. And it is for string quartet and orchestra. And some of you may know this already, but I'm delighted that I will be joined on stage by the Takash Quartet to play Absolute Jest with the orchestra. So that is pretty thrilling. What's really very exciting is that the new violist, Richard O'Neill, who will take over from Jerry, will be giving his very first Boulder performance on that night. And there's a rather cute story about this because Richard, when Jerry joined the quartet, prior to that, had auditioned, and they said, "You're a wonderful violist, but you're far too young and inexperienced. Go off and have a career, and I'm sure you'll play in a wonderful quartet one day." Well, the moment has evidently come. So I'm thrilled. Absolute Jest is a piece by John Adams written about 10 years ago, which is entirely inspired by Beethoven. It has themes from all kinds of works of Beethoven, and in particular, a very difficult string quartet, Opus 131, which I played, I think, 150 times in my life, and was always scared of it, because there was a moment in one of the movements which is so virtuosic for the first violin that it's just a matter of luck. It's a little bit like, trying to win a point off Djokovic. You have to be lucky as well as good. So, and he gives this to the first violin section. The whole first violin section has to play this incredibly difficult passage while the quartet sits and listens. I think it's actually kind of witty and brilliant sounding, but the whole work is about 23 minutes long, and it's absolutely fantastic. And then in the second half, now I can show you. There you go. In the second half, a piece you may know, Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. Well, it's apotheosis of the dance. When you're listening to it, you can't imagine anything greater, right? And maybe there isn't anything greater. I don't know. I've always loved this piece. In fact, when I became a conductor, when I couldn't play any longer, that's the first symphony I ever conducted, so it's very meaningful to me. So there's your opening night, Thursday and Friday, 25th and 26th. Now, we go to the weekend. We are doing 2 weekends of all Mozart, as we did last summer. It just seemed to be such a lovely way to spend a Sunday evening for all of us that we decided to keep it going for another summer. Now, Christina and Michelle Norton are twins, and they are absolutely phenomenal pianists in their own right. At a certain point, somebody suggested that they might play 4 hands, and their teacher, Josef Kallerstein, says it's basically 1 mind, 4 hands. And they are uncannily, as is perhaps not surprising, in one world, and they have had an extraordinary career, won Avery Fisher grants and all kinds of acknowledgements, played all over the world. And I'm delighted that they're coming, in particular because you hear Mozart piano concertos all the time, but how often do you hear the 2 piano concerto? Very rarely, and it's an absolutely beautiful piece. So we have 2 lovely overtures, and the magnificent Linz Symphony. So I think that should be a beautiful evening, first Sunday of the festival. Here we go, the opening of the Robert Mann series, a wonderful program featuring Beethoven's first quartet, Opus 18, number 1, which has a slow movement that is utterly profound, written in memory of one of his brothers who had passed away, and really, really one of the most profoundly moving and deep pieces he wrote during that century up until 1800. They end with the Brahms A minor quartet, staggeringly fantastic piece. And what I think is really interesting is this Britten quartet number 3. Now, Benjamin Britten, many of you may know that Benjamin Britten, I was very fortunate as a kid when I was 10 years old to meet Benjamin Britten and actually sing for him on recordings. And I even played the Indian bells in the recording of Midsummer Night's Dream on Decca. I must have had some nerve because the whole London Symphony was in front of me and Benjamin Britten over there, and I had to play the Indian bells and create an accelerando. But you're fearless when you're 10, so you just do whatever. But Britten has always been one of my absolute favorite composers, and he was an incredibly inspired musician and very, very charming person. And this is a real masterpiece. So it's 3 Bs, not intentional, but it happens. And just a wonderful program from the Juilliard Quartet. Then we go to this week. We're doing a kind of interesting combination. It's not really a celebration of July 4th, and it's not really not a celebration of July 4th, if you know what I mean. So, you know, you do see Copland several times there. So the second half obviously has an American slant to it. Chris Brubeck, fabulous composer, wrote this piece for Sharon. It's with guitar and orchestra, and he's Dave Brubeck's son. Oh, one of several, but just a really inspired musician and great composer. And the first half has this fabulous sort of Spanish subject to it with Alvarado de Gracioso, one of Ravel's real masterpieces, just 6 or 7 minutes long, but full of the great colors and rhythms, Spanish rhythms that Ravel was such an incredible expert at. And he was French, but from the Basque region and had a Spanish background. And Concerto de Aranjuez, I think we've all heard and loved for a long time. Sharon is one of the very greatest guitarists in the history of the instrument, and from a very young age. She has won Grammys and, again, Avery Fisher grants. She was named Instrumentalist of the Year by Musical America last year. First time a guitarist has ever had that honor. So it's really very thrilling to have her on our stage. And Andrew Graham's wonderful young conductor, actually also a violinist originally, and doing all kinds of extraordinary things, and very imaginative programmer, and he certainly helped a lot with this programming. Then we come to our second Mozart program, Sunday, July 5th. It's the second Sunday of the festival. Konrad Tau is now 25. He won ASCAP Awards 8 years in a row as a composer. I think he also has won an Avery Fisher grant. So he's a composer and a wonderful pianist and also a wonderful violinist. So, you know, not really somebody I like to spend time with. I'm kidding. I mean, some people are just too talented. but he is an incredible artist. And all styles. And when you invite someone to play Mozart, you have to really have the confidence that that is something that's going to be fresh and pure, and he just has it all. And Jamanu is a wonderful conductor. She's music director in Hamilton, but also I think she's been assistant in St. Louis and is now principal guest in Dallas. She's from New Zealand and a really, really talented conductor. And nowadays, you know, there are just probably more female conductors than there are male conductors, and which is a great thing, making up for lost time. And she's a wonderful, wonderful artist, and I think it's been a while since we had a female conductor, if we ever did, even. We did? Okay, good. Ooh, thank you so much. Okay, so the program is lovely. Mozart 23, G major, I think, and the G minor symphony. Nothing more beautiful than that. So there we go. There's the second of the two Mozart programs. Now, the St. Lawrence String Quartet. They are originally all Canadian, came from Toronto. They studied in Toronto, and they came down to study at Yale. And I remember them coming into the room at Yale. This is quite a lot of years ago. And they started to play the Debussy Quartet. And you all know, because you listen to a lot of music, sometimes four people can be incredibly good players when they sound okay. And sometimes they can be very good players and sound fantastic as a quartet. And then sometimes, in exceptional cases, they can be extraordinary players and sound fantastic as a quartet. And that's what they were like. And teaching them was just a great joy. It was every time I went up to Yale in that period of time, they would play a different late Beethoven or Bartok for me, and I would just love it. And you know, it's when you're teaching people that talented, it's more about inspiration and asking them questions about why they're doing certain things, and to make sure that they're always on the right path. Well, they've had a phenomenal career. They're in residence at Stanford University in California, and they're playing a beautiful program. These Haydn Opus 20 quartets, there are 6 of them, and they are among the greatest masterpieces ever. You know, Haydn wrote so many quartets that we tend not to know the Haydn quartets all that well. But these are, in a way, I'd have to say, the first real masterpieces. And among the 6, the 4th is my favorite, so I was delighted that they chose to start the program with that. As you can see, they're playing the Debussy String Quartet. After all these years, they're still playing it. It is indescribably fantastic, exciting, slow movement that you just cannot believe. In fact, the very first concert I ever heard Robert Mann play, they played the Debussy Quartet, so this is very meaningful for me. And then the second piece is another piece by John Adams, who we could have called our composer in residence. And we thought of it, but since he's only going to be with us for 4 days, a little bit later in the festival, we thought that might be a little bit of an exaggeration. But he does appear quite often, and this is a masterwork written for the St. Lawrence. And so a very exciting program from them. Now we have Jean-Marie returning for, this is now the 3rd week of the festival, July 9 and 10, Thursday and Friday. You can see a little excerpt from Fantasia, if you remember Mussorgsky, Night on Bald Mountain. Absolutely fabulous piece, very, very exciting. It's an all-Russian program. Tchaikovsky First Piano Concerto. Now, Nare Argamanyan, you might suspect is Armenian, and you'd be right. And she won the Montreal competition many years ago, and she's had a huge career in Europe. She's still very, very young, but one of the great interpreters of the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto, which we all know and love. Prokofiev's Fifth Symphony is a very extraordinary work because it was written in the Soviet Union in 1944. Now, we can all perhaps imagine something of what life was like in the Soviet Union in 1944. Shostakovich had just written his Leningrad Symphony, number 7, and he was writing his 8th Symphony, which is like a psychological drama, one of the most painful and agonizing and magnificent symphonies he ever wrote. And meanwhile, Prokofiev wrote a symphony all about belief in the future and the positive elements of mankind. And it is such an uplifting work. It's a masterpiece. And in fact, it used to be, and many of you may remember this, it used to be Prokofiev 5 was one of those sellout pieces. It would sell out, and I don't mean, we use that expression differently nowadays, right? But this, you would program Prokofiev 5 and all the tickets would be gone. And somehow in the last 10 or 15 years, people don't play it so often. And it's phenomenal. And so I'm delighted that Jean-Marie is going to be bringing that great program to us, wonderful Russian program. Okay, this is fun. The family concert, the story of Babar, these really inventive stuff. Did any of you see them last? Maybe not. That's not the sort of concert you would go to. Some of you did. They're brilliant, and they engaged the young generation so extraordinarily last year that we said, you've got to come back and do something else. So you can see the program. It's a lot of popular things and the story of Babar. And then this is all interesting because Leopold Mozart Toy Symphony, then it was always Haydn's Toy Symphony when we were growing up, when I was growing up. And then they said, oh no, maybe Leopold Mozart wrote it, and now they think maybe somebody else wrote it. And I think it was written by the Earl of Oxford, personally, but that's just my view. Anyway, lovely program for the young generation and families. Okay, another extraordinary violinist, Jean-Marie's second concert on the Sunday night. Angelo Jiang Yu is a phenomenal talent. Won the Yehudi Menuhin competition in London when he was extremely young, but still a teenager. He's still, as you can see, very young. And he's going to play these lovely showpieces, Ravel Tsigan and Sarasate Zigeunerweisen. You know, both these fantastic virtuosic gypsy-type pieces. In between, we've got a couple of Hungarian dances. And it starts with a concert romanesque by Ligeti. Now, for those of you who have heard music by Ligeti, there are two Ligetis, really. There was the one that was writing music at this point in Budapest. He was born in Romania, in Transylvania, but he lived in Budapest. And he wrote this piece in 1951, and it is very, very tonal. The orchestra had one rehearsal, and because there was a dissonance somewhere, they took the music back and said, no, we're not playing this. And and when you hear it, it is extremely traditional music, especially for the middle of the 20th century. But that was what it was like to be under a regime, such a strict regime. Ligeti finally left in the 60s and then started to become who he ultimately was a very experimental, absolutely brilliant mind, and one of the most challenging composers. But this is a really wonderful, virtuosic, sort of little concerto for orchestra. And I think this whole program, the first half just has a lovely quality to hang together. And then we have John Delancey. Wasn't he Q? Is that right? Yeah, okay. The Next Generation. And talking of the Next Generation, his father, John Delancey, was the principal oboist of the Philadelphia Orchestra for almost 30 years, and then was the director of the Curtis Institute, and a very great leader he was. Anyway, John is a fabulous actor, and he grew up in a musical family, is a musician himself, so he is going to be narrating excerpts from the Midsummer Night's Dream of Mendelssohn. Of course, he's going to create somewhat his own choice of text, which I think is always interesting when you have an actor who's also a musician and they start to put together their own ideas of how this should work best with the wonderful music of Mendelssohn. So that's a very beautiful, entertaining evening in the middle of July. Okay, there are four very, very cool guys, don't you think? I think it's very... so let's see. Colin Jacobson, Johnny Gandelsman, Nick Cords, and I don't actually know the cellist, although his last name I think is Nicholas, but the two in the middle, I only realized recently I taught at Curtis for a short time, and I remember Johnny Gandelsman because he could play anything, including incredible improvisations and kind of gypsy music. And Nick Cords, the violist there, is a second from right, is an extraordinary, intelligent musician. Well, these guys have been playing together for quite a long time and commissioning all kinds of new works. And this is the beginning of what we're going to call, it's the fourth week, we're calling it No Boundaries. It's all music of today, with one exception, or perhaps two. But it's living composers. You can see in the first half, every single piece up there is something that is very new and that they, in most cases, commissioned and will be fascinating. And they always introduce their music, and they're very, very entertaining. And that's Colin Jacobson on the left, by the way. He's a great, great violinist and, again, highly intelligent musician. So they're a really interesting group. They're ending the program, I think very appropriately, with something that will always be novel. That any late string quartet of Beethoven will forever be modern. And particularly the Grosser Fugue, which we played last summer, which some of you may have heard, which Stravinsky said it was modern when it was written and it will be forever modern. Opus 132 is a stunningly beautiful piece with the Heilige Dankgesang. Beethoven had been close to death in the years before he wrote this, about 1824. He wrote this in 1825, and he could hardly believe that he had the strength to write music again. And so this movement is probably 18 minutes long. It is like a long, lengthy prayer, a Heilige Dankgesang. And it is really one of the most uplifting and beautiful pieces of music that has ever been written. And as I said, will forever be a modern voice. So it belongs. Here we go. This is when we start to have the residency of John Adams, which I think is an incredibly exciting development. The program begins with a world premiere by Wang Jie. That's a commission of ours. We have begun to commission works. Now, Wang Jie just wrote to us literally half an hour ago what this piece is essentially about. And so I might as well try to read it to you. I'm eager to work on this piece every day because I get to relive my days climbing in the magnificent El Dorado Canyon. She's a big climber. Even this morning, I can still feel the sandstones in my fingers. I recall having arrived at the crux of my first El Dorado climb. I took a soft gaze and made 5 moves in one breath, and I did not fall. As of last week, rhythms featuring the number 5 have been showing up everywhere in the music. I'm so looking forward to sharing my love for the El Dorado Canyon with the CMF audiences. So there you go. That'll be exciting. So that's one of the commissions that we have in the pipeline for the next year or two. Now, so John Adams will have arrived at this point, and we're doing a piece, as you can see, by Samuel Adams. Now, I was in touch with John because I had the first and last pieces on this program, but I really wanted a concerto, and I thought, let me ask John, because he and I have worked on programming together quite a bit. And I said, can you suggest something? And he suggested all kinds of things to me, lots of good suggestions. He said, look, I hate to do this because you might think it's nepotism, but my son actually has written a violin concerto, which you might just want to listen to. So he sends it to me, and it is amazing. It is so compelling, so powerful, and so imaginative. It's 5 movements. The 2, 3, 4 are like fast, slow, fast movements. And then there's a prologue and an epilogue. But it's wonderful colors and the conversation. It is a chamber concerto. There's the violin solo is a huge part. But everybody in the chamber orchestra, or the chamber group that accompanies it, also has very significant solo parts. It's a really fascinating piece. Incidentally, John often has said to me, I just can't believe that my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Adams, called me John. I mean, why would you do that? To which we answer, and you called your son Sam? Okay, yeah. Okay. So here we are. Now, the second, City Noire, is one of John's sort of recent masterpieces, written probably 8 years ago, something like that. And it was commissioned by LA Philharmonic and the Toronto Symphony and various other orchestras. And he actually did one of the very first performances with the Toronto Symphony, and I was there. It's an incredibly exciting piece with a huge saxophone part. And Timothy McAllister is probably the greatest American saxophone player around. And always John's choice. So much, in fact, that I should tell you that this May, I'm doing John's saxophone concerto at the Prague Festival, and I asked Tim to do it. But John said, I'm sorry, Tim will be rehearsing City Noire with me and the New York Philharmonic, so I'm not letting him out. That's how big the part is, but how much in demand he is. But fortunately, there's another amazing saxophone player who's going to come and play it in Prague. But City Noire is an extremely entertaining, very virtuosic piece, really one of his masterpieces. And I'm delighted that he'll be there. I may not be delighted, actually, because when conducting in front of a composer is not always so much fun. But anyway, he'll be there. So this is... and you see that this is Thursday, July 16th. We don't repeat these programs. When we're dealing with music of today, we think one performance And then everyone should come and not miss it. It's incredible music, and a little bit different from what we have been doing in the past. Let's now go to a program that I'm very excited about. It's called Kaleidoscope on Friday night, and it features many of the festival orchestra players. Chris Taylor, know and love, from Boulder, yes? Okay. Kit, oh, really? Oh, and he's Kit Taylor. Okay, so, well, I stand corrected. But anyway, I mean, he's incredible. I don't know if you've ever heard him play the Varigard of Messiaen, but he's really one of those extraordinary talents. And he was delighted to come. So you'll see that Jisoo Jung is playing the marimba. She is sort of from another world. When she plays the marimba, it becomes another instrument. So I'll go through the program for you. We start with the Joan Tower fanfare for the Uncommon Woman, 4 trumpets that will be played off stage. We will then go to Nico Muley's Big Time for string quartet and percussion, which will be in the center of the stage. Then Jisoo will be off to the right, as you're looking at it, side of the stage. She'll appear with her marimba and play this fantastic piece by Erica Wazen. Extraordinary. This is really a demonstration of huge talent of American composers. After that, the piano will have turned up in the middle of the stage, and this piece, Turning, by Derek Bermel, is spellbinding. I think it's wonderful. Kit suggested it to me, and I studied it and listened to it several times, and I thought, this is something we should all hear. Intermission. Now, off to the left side of the stage, there will be a bass drum and 3 percussionists and a few other percussion instruments, and they will play what is a 4-minute piece by Zivkovic called Trio per Uno. Brilliant. Absolutely amazing. Then, in the middle of the stage, William Balkan Piano Quintet. Now we'll have the string quartet who played the Nico Muley and Christopher Taylor, and they will play the William Balkan Second Piano Quintet, which is wonderful. He's an extraordinary composer, because he's so good at the light side of music as well. William Balkan, we don't necessarily think of him always in the way we should, I think, and he's a really important voice. And this is a fabulous piece, which Christopher premiered a few years ago and recorded, actually. And then, to end the program, we go back to Jisoo on the right side of the stage, and she will play this fabulous Keith Jarrett sort of improvisation from the Cologne concert, and end with a really virtuosic piece by Lee Howard Stevens called Rhythmic Caprice. So it's a very, very unusual concert, but this is the one I have to tell you that I'm looking forward to, because I can just sit and watch, right? More than almost any other concert. Please tell your friends about this concert, because it'll be an evening of music unlike anything you've ever seen on a sort of classical music stage. And just a wonderful variety of extraordinary talent. Finally, the end of the No Boundaries celebration. John will also be on the podium at this point. He's bringing Jeremy Denk, fantastic pianist. He will be conducting the second piece there, is Must the Devil Have All the Good Tunes? This is a line that inspired him. For many, many years, he said, I have to write a piece based on this, like the Totentanz. He found it very inspiring. Finally, a few years ago, he said, it's a piano concerto, and he wrote it for Yu Jia Wang, premiered it maybe a little more than a year ago with the LA Philharmonic, and it's great, tremendously exciting, and John will actually be conducting that. He will start the program with a piece that he has a little foundation of his own, because he wants to now inspire the next generation, not only his son. And Gabriella Smith is a fabulous young composer who went to the Curtis Institute. And this is a piece she wrote a few years ago, Tumblebird Contrails, and it was played recently by the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And John said almost every member of the orchestra came up to me and said, that was really good. we really enjoyed that. And he said, that doesn't happen all that often. So that's the first half. Now, when I said there are two pieces that maybe don't count as being by living composers, very tragically, this Symphony No. 6 by Christopher Rouse was premiered in, I would say, November. And Christopher Rouse, who's an extraordinary voice, I mean, really a powerful composer, emotionally packs a huge punch. He knew when he was asked to write this symphony that he only had a few months to live. And there was nothing, his cancer was irreversible. And this piece is styled after Mahler's Ninth Symphony. It's 4 movements, but is nowhere near the length of Mahler's Ninth. It's only about 23 or 24 minutes. And it was premiered by the Cincinnati Symphony. And the New York Times suggested in their review that it was one of the most important pieces written by any contemporary composer in the last several decades. And I actually contacted John Adams and I said, you know, as we're designing this program, I would really love for us to do the second ever performance of Chris Rouse's Last Symphony. And I said, you know, are you okay with that? He said, actually, we were both huge baseball fans and we had the same birthday. And I would love it if you would do that. He even said, if you decide you'd like me to conduct it, I will. So we're fighting over it. But anyway, but it's, I think it's very significant. I love the idea that we can also react to current events and do things that have been written recently in the festival, especially during this week, which I'd love to become a regular event that we, yes, of course, the music by all these great composers of the past, it's very important that we play it with freshness as if it was just written yesterday, and that we feel your love of that music. All of that is hugely important. But we also have, I think, the great joy of hearing what is being created today. And this week allows us to hear all kinds of music, of all kinds of styles, which simply didn't exist just a few years ago. So I hope you will bring lots of friends to this week. In fact, it's kind of crucial because if we don't have enough people in the audiences, it'll be much harder for me to keep it going. This is really a bit of a sell, isn't it? Anyway, here we go. So, but it's huge. When I was in Toronto, I did 14 years of what we called the New Creations Festival, and it actually became one of the most popular tickets of the season. And the fact that you don't know what you're going to hear is all part of what makes it incredibly exciting. And by the way, last thing I'll say about this, if you tried to do this 30 or 40 years ago, it was much harder because it was more or less illegal to write anything tonal 30 or 40 years ago, right? It was only Philip Glass, and John Adams at that time was really a minimalist. But most of the music that was being written was good because we couldn't understand it, right? You know, at a certain period. I mean, there's a lot of great music of that kind, and there's a lot of music that's just impossible to listen to. But very few composers are writing like that anymore. And it's not something that I want to bring to you. I don't want you to come in and listen to a bunch of incomprehensible squeaks and whistles to you, and then have you go back and say, oh, that was wonderful. Because, you know, it is only wonderful from some kind of intellectual point of view. That's not the kind of music we're going to be doing here. It's always something that will engage you on some level. So there we go. Now, Mozart and Brahms. Well, I don't know if you know these pieces, but it doesn't get any better than that in the chamber music world. You know, is that Mozart's greatest masterpiece for chamber music, or is it the clarinet quintet? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's just stunningly beautiful piece. The slow movement of which was played at our wedding. Ah, she remembers. Good. And then the Brahms G major string quintet is among the most uplifting. G major was a very special key for Brahms. Something very special happened when he wrote in G major. And this particular piece, when it starts, if you just go on YouTube and just listen to the first 20 seconds of this piece, you'll see what I mean. It is so noble and so positive and so dramatic and exciting and full of energy. Sometimes we think Brahms doesn't always, when he writes Hungarian dances, yes. Some of his finales, yes. But, you know, does it have that kind of optimistic energy that we love so much that obviously Beethoven gives us and Tchaikovsky? This is a great example of that in Brahms. So a wonderful program played, it will be Kalin and various other of our wonderful string players. Okay, this is the 5th week we're in. Jan Liszecki is a pianist of Polish descent, born in Calgary, started playing the piano at a very young age and already had an incredible maturity and could play almost anything before he was a teenager. When he was 15, he was signed by Deutsche Grammophon. And when he was about 16, he came to Toronto to play with me for the first time. And apart from the fact that he is one of the most engaging and charming and kind human beings you could ever imagine, his music making is beyond belief. It's deeply spiritual, truly extraordinary. He recorded live with the Academy of St. Martin's in the Fields all the Beethoven concerti for Deutsche Grammophon in the last year. They're actually mostly on YouTube. And he is going this summer to play just 2 Beethoven cycles, one with the Chamber Orchestra of Europe and one for us. And it is really an artist of enormous significance, I think. His wisdom, along with his modesty and his innate musicality, brings a freshness and a beauty to these concerti that is really beyond belief. So this is the first of the programs. We start with the Fidelio Overture, and then we have them in the order in which they were written, which is 2, then 1. Then on the Friday, we have Coriolan, very tragic overture, and then the 3rd and 4th. And then at the weekend, we have Opus 131. That's the piece that inspired a lot of Absolute Jest, going back to the beginning of the program, where I just mentioned earlier that I'd played it 150 times. I guess I'd played it so many times that I wanted to force other people to play it. And so I made an arrangement of it for string orchestra and wrote a bass part, or at least took the cello part and created a bass part out of it. Well, it's just a staggering piece. And talk about novel. 7 movements played without interruption. And the opening fugue is just among the most engaging pieces of music. It starts just with the violin, first violin. I remember once we were in somewhere like Austin, Texas, in this massive hall, and we had played a first half with Marilyn Horne singing, which was an incredible experience. And then the second half was about to start. We walk on stage, it's completely quiet, and we're going to play Opus 131. So you leave a little bit of silence before you start, and then I started this theme. And then there's a sforzando. And at that moment, a baby woke up and started screaming. That interval was just more than they could handle. And it's one of the only times I've ever had to stop a concert. And the poor mother, you know, just... Anyway, I mean, it's 37 minutes long, so it's too long for a baby to cry. Anyway, I'm just thrilled that we're doing this. This is the final concert of the cycle, right? So it's got the Emperor Concerto in it. But I wanted to do something a little bit unusual with this cycle, something that has essentially almost never been played. I think I conducted the St. Louis Symphony with it once, but it's almost never been played in America. I've done it in Europe far more and in Canada, but so it's quite an experience, that piece, and truly heroic for somebody who was at that stage in his life. Very, very sick. I think it was written actually after 132. It's another one of those situations where the order of the opus numbers is not actually correct, but it's within 18 months or so of Beethoven's passing. So there's your wonderful Jan Liszecki Beethoven cycle, and now we come to the final week, which is a beautiful chamber music concert Beethoven Quintet for piano and winds, and the Septet for strings and winds. Two absolute masterpieces. I just realized that this week has a sort of scheme to it, key-wise. Both of these pieces are in E flat, which is one of the most joyous keys, one of the most calm keys for a composer, and especially in that period when key meant a lot. When you choose to write something in a certain key, it already made a statement about what the character of that music was going to be. But both of these are absolutely beautiful masterpieces, and it should be lovely to feature our great wind players on this final chamber program. And then we come to the second to last concert. So we've gone from E flat. The next thing we hear is the violin concerto in D. A very novel piece, starts with 4 notes on the timpani, which we accept because we've heard the Beethoven Violin Concerto so many times. Imagine what people thought then. Wow, that's a funny way to start a piece. But Beethoven always using his imagination, and I think there's something about the shock value that was precious for him, especially because the piece itself is in fact so incredibly elegant and profound. Anybody remember Augustin playing the Barber Concerto a couple of years ago? Yeah. I mean, this is truly, I don't know, I stand next to him and I just can't believe what's coming out of his instrument. Well, more than his instrument, out of his soul. He's a gift beyond belief. And his playing of the Beethoven Concerto is, I've done it with him, and it's magnificent. And then to sort of close off the Beethoven celebration, why not go to C minor and hear the Fifth Symphony? Because, you know, people think you hear it all the time. Actually, it's not programmed all that often. And it's not bad, you know. So there we go. We're really celebrating at this point Beethoven. Final concert, Mahler 5, inspired as much as one can say by the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven, inspired by all kinds of other things. Now we've moved up to C sharp. So we've gone E flat, D, C, C sharp. But of course, Mahler being Mahler doesn't keep the piece in C sharp. The whole piece is really a journey from C sharp to the final D major, this heroic key. And this piece starts as tragically as anything can. I mean, for many people, it is their absolute favorite symphony of Mahler. For many people, their favorite symphony of all time. Written in 5 movements, but 3 parts. The first 2 movements kind of complement each other. The first movement is a funeral march of extraordinary power and tragedy, the kind of funeral march really only Mahler could write, with a fantastic trumpet part, virtuoso trumpet part, and then contrasts that are really quite petrifying. And then, as I said, a second movement that complements it and comments in a way on it and becomes much more tender, and builds to the most incredible kind of climax, but then closes rather mysteriously. And then you come to the middle movement, the second part, which is a horn obbligato, one of the most famous horn solos and brilliant horn solos in the repertoire. And it's basically a waltz, and it is about the power of life and the positive elements of life, but also has the most incredibly tender moments. You probably know the piece. I don't have to try to describe it all. The fourth movement is the Adagietto, only for strings and harp. And Mahler gave this to Alma when he fell in love with her. He wrote it. It's incredibly inspired. And it is a piece about love, even though it has been played at too many funerals. But there's nothing wrong with playing pieces about love at funerals, I guess. But it is just so poised and magnificent, and ends quietly, and then suddenly the horn speaks again and takes us on this introduction to the final movement, which is simply heroic and joyous. And the final moments of Mahler 5, it's pretty hard to stay in your chair. Not a problem for me, of course, but it's just a great way to end the festival. Just as I felt last year, ending with Mahler 3 was so extremely exciting. And what a fabulous audience. I don't know if many of you were there, but it was silent in there for an hour and a half. Just incredible. And, you know, I don't have to tell you that there's a participation about listening which is palpable for us on stage. And people say, oh, was that a good audience? And people, what do you mean? Was it a big audience, is what you mean? No, there's a quality of listening that we are very sensitive to on stage, and that can really make a huge difference to the feeling of inspiration that we have. And I have to say that the audience that you all become, and that your friends and other people who come to the festival, that the atmosphere that you create is very, very special. And it makes this festival and Chautauqua Auditorium an incredible place to celebrate all of this wonderful music. So I'm just thrilled to be coming back for another summer. I want to thank all of you who have been so generous towards the festival, so supportive in every way. I think it's really an exciting time. We're, as you can see, moving towards having more and more internationally renowned artists trying to do really fascinating programming, a little bit out of the box, try to take a unique stance, create an identity for the festival, so that maybe in a couple of years, everybody in America is going to want to come. We'll have traffic jams, and then you'll be angry with me. Thank you very much.